The last thing for us to deal with regarding emotional intensity and persuasion is the twin, I'm trying to think the term to use here, but they're twin ways that you depict an issue. Okay, so twin ways of presenting an issue in a way that speaks to the emotions. All right, these twins are very nearly worded. The one is Energia, spelled like energy with an IA on the end, Energia. And the other is Enargia with an A in the middle of the word, Enargia. Not like energy, but Enargy right there. So let me explain the difference between Energia and Enargia. Scratch that. I just messed it up for you. Let me try and say it again. Let me explain the difference to you between Energia and Enargia. Okay? Energia involves giving energy to a depicted scene. Okay? Now, the rhetoric companion points out the necessity of feeling the emotions that we want our audience to feel and feeling these things honestly. So, ideally, you feel the passion, the emotion that you want to produce in your audience. Okay, so Energia involves giving energy to a depicted scene. This is available to you when you are sharing with the audience what you yourself have felt, have experienced, so you don't have to make it up here, all right? And I hate to say it that way, but Enargia deals more with making it up, but not making it up, if you will. Enargia involves recognizing what emotion should be felt and then attempting to make your audience feel that, to help them feel it. So, Energia, you feel the emotion vividly yourself, and so you're able to speak from your heart. There's a passion there that's already there. You don't have to stir it up. You don't have to do anything. Just express what you feel already. And when you do that, effectively, your audience also feels what you feel, or at least understands why you feel that way. Okay? You may not always be able to get them to feel it. Again, that has to do with proximity. That has to do with engagement in the issue. But I will say that it's hard to be indifferent when someone is really passionate about something. There have been a few times where I was listening to a speaker and I'm thinking to myself very coldly, I'm thinking, man, this guy's really into this. Or this guy is really passionate about this. And at least it gets your attention when you see that. Pardon me. Enargia is used when you've not experienced the emotion or even been part of the scene, but you're able to imagine what it would feel like and help your audience to experience it with you. A wonderful example of Enargia, if you want to look it up on your own sometime. Ronald Reagan gave a speech on the anniversary of the invasion at Normandy, and he gave the speech at Normandy, there at the cemetery. And when he gave it, he read from a book of the daughter of one of the men who fought at Normandy. And he had died just right before that anniversary. And she was sitting there in the audience, and he's reading her words. And I mean, I've watched it a dozen times. I show it in my rhetoric class in high school. And I can't watch it without getting choked up and emotional about it. Now, Ronald Reagan was not at Normandy. He didn't fight at Normandy. He didn't experience that. He didn't feel what that man's daughter felt who wrote the book. She was not there either. She related her dad's story of the experience in a book. And yet it speaks to you. So Reagan, who was a master communicator and worth studying if you want to learn effective communication, but Reagan knew how to make us feel, to make himself feel what he would not have felt by experience. And that's Enargia. So you haven't experienced it, but you imagine it in such a way that it's like you are experiencing it. It's like you are reliving it. So this Enargia relies on picturing the event through your descriptions, inviting the audience to put themselves in the situation so that they can experience the event like they're there. They can picture it in their mind, even through your descriptions. Imagine this. David, King David, before he was king, is in the wilderness of Judah. He's running from Saul. He's scared. Saul comes to where he is, and so he goes farther south. And he finds a big rock. He's got 600 troops with him. Saul has 200,000 troops with him. He finds this big rock. He hides behind it. He keeps that rock between himself and Saul. And then Saul sends half his troops in one direction around that rock and half his troops in another direction around that rock. And I say a rock, I mean like a big bluff or big mountain there, a big hill, I should say. And Saul's army of 200,000 is circling around and surrounds David, and they're closing in. And David is thinking, I'm done. I'm done. We're done right now. I mean, who wouldn't think that? And then all of a sudden, as if on a signal, the army of King Saul vacates the battlefield. They had David, and then they leave, just like that. Imagine the relief. Imagine the amazement, the shock, the awe of that. That's Enargia. The sense of I can picture that. I can see what happened right there. It's probably the most dramatic event in the life of David that no one ever thinks of or talks about, but that did happen in David's life. Another example of Enargia would be Mark Antony's funeral oration when he held up the bloody garment of Julius Caesar. Because Mark Antony was Caesar's friend, but he wasn't there when he was murdered. So what he did, because the audience is actually hostile to Julius Caesar and therefore hostile to Mark Antony, so what he does is hold up that bloody garment and say, see right here? And he shows the punctures in the garment, and he shows the blood and where the blood flowed, and he points at it and says, right here, Caesar bled out his life, and Caesar loved you, he says. And so Antony, who felt the pain and anger of the betrayal involving the assassination of Caesar, recognizes that the audience is not in agreement, and so he uses a visual aid to help them picture what they've done. Antony helped the audience feel what he felt, and that's Enargia, helping the audience feel what you feel, or Energia would be describing them, expressing what you feel in a vivid way so that they feel it too. Enargia would be what they don't feel and you haven't experienced, but you relive it in your description so that they experience it. Okay, and then one other thing, honorific and pejorative language. There's some more big words for you, $100 words that you can take in, slap down in a situation. Honorific, that one's pretty obvious. It's language that honors. So there are certain descriptions that are used when we're honoring a particular case. So if you, for example, let me see. If you describe, let's see, uh, um, Donald Trump, one of the most polarizing presidents in history, so he gets used a lot, especially right now. He's relevant to us. I mean, he still lives rent-free in the liberals' heads. But that's pejorative. When I said that, that's pejorative. Pejorative means that I'm casting reflection in my description. Okay? So when the liberals call him Orange Man, when they say that we want a president, not a dictator, that's pejorative right there. Okay? And when someone refers to Donald Trump as a modern-day Ronald Reagan, that's honorific. And there are certain ways that you describe things that show your attitude towards those things. We've been doing this in our word plays where you describe a teacher a certain way, like a teacher is a dictator of the mind. Well, that's pejorative. Or you say a teacher is a nurturer of young souls. That's honorific. Okay, so honorific language treats people and things respectfully. Pejorative language disparages them and downplays them. And so this is another thing that you've got to remember. The way that you describe things not only expresses your attitude about those things and invites the audience to take on that same attitude, but also it demonstrates what your standard is. So in the secular world, secularism is going to treat Christianity and orthodoxy with a certain kind of pejorative, with a certain kind of scorn and ridicule. And on the other hand, secularism has its orthodoxy as well, and things that they are not just demanding tolerance for, but that they are promoting, that they are praising, that they are commending with the language and the descriptions that they use. Listen to the news and you'll see what I mean, that you can tell what they honor and what they despise based on the language that they use. Science deniers, there's a pejorative for you. Election deniers, that's another one right now that people will use. Integrity in elections, on the other hand, is honorific of the idea that we need to question or that we are challenging election results. All right, so these kinds of things. Remember that your standard always must be a biblical standard. And remember the quote. I've given it before, but I'll give it here right now. 9 times out of 10, the coarse word is the word that condemns an evil, and the refined word is the word that excuses it. So don't be afraid to use a coarse word. And in fact, remember that if you use language a certain way, okay, so for instance, if you say that he is a homosexual, maybe that's not honorific, but that certainly tones down any opposition to it. If you use the term sodomite, then on the other hand, there's going to be a visceral response to that kind of term because it is a pejorative, and in our culture today, it's an attack on a sacred institution, really, and so a sacred agenda for sure. So those are things to consider as you consider Pathos, putting your audience in the right frame of mind. Have a great day.